Studio now, Pam Duncan from Inclusion Scotland and Andrew Lowe, who is the Director of Social Work for Borders Council and also President of the Association of Directors of Social Work. Thanks so much for coming in, both of you, today. Pam, I know you're hoarse because you were on the demonstration yesterday and you're losing your voice, but before that happens, when we look at what's happening here, Pam, how significant do you think it is in terms of disabled people's rights?
Disabled people tell us at Inclusion Scotland that this is the biggest attack they've faced in the best part of 40 years. They're facing a double whammy of the cuts. They're disproportionately affected. They're not only affected by the specific cuts to disability benefits, from, for example, the 20% reduction of people from disability living allowance transferred onto the personal independence payment, and also the impact of the Independent Living Fund closing its doors to new applications.
And when we hear these things and people say, oh, everybody's got to take a cut in their budgets and all the rest of it now, what impact does this actually have on real people's lives?
Well, disabled people have been coming together under the banner of the hardest hit because they genuinely are the hardest hit. We don't bear the broadest shoulder. We don't have the broadest shoulders to bear the brunt. 47.5% of disabled people already live in poverty, and 49% of disabled people who are in work are having, obviously, their jobs are under threat as a result of some of the redundancies that have to happen. The majority of those people who do work in the public sector or the voluntary sector where jobs are under threat. And then, of course, for those who don't work, which is the majority of disabled people, they're facing cuts in their pocket in terms of their benefits. And so they're absolutely terrified about the impact that these cuts are going to have on them.
And presumably in an intensely competitive jobs market, it becomes more and more difficult for disabled people to get work.
Extremely difficult, and a lot of the cuts are focused on, we heard Maria Miller talking about what people can do rather than what they can't, and that is the language that the independent living movement and disabled people have used for a long time. Okay. They spoke about disabled people being contributors to society. They spoke about what they need in order to help them get there, but the answer is not to pull the rug from under us. I've seen a statement by the Department of Work and Pensions that talks about how they spend already £40 billion on disabled people. To me, well, first of all, there are still huge inequalities for disabled people across the board in terms of work, in terms of poverty, in terms of access to housing. And so that £40 billion simply doesn't cover the genuine experience that disabled people are having, but it's also another message that disabled people cannot be afforded by society.
Well, Andrew, when we look to the funding, there's this amount of money that can be disputed whether it's enough or not. But actually, do you think it is being used at the moment appropriately? Could it be used better? Could there be more grassroots up rather than top-down initiatives?
Well, I think this is the complication of this issue. Very few people would doubt that we need welfare reform because at the moment it's complicated, it's not always equitably distributed, and there's all sorts of irrational settings within it. But that being said, there's a complicating overlay of a need to make savings, and I think sometimes the one is used to disguise the other. So if you're saying to me, is it necessary to make these reforms? I don't think it's necessary to make these reforms, and I don't think we should be putting a price on the independence of people with disabilities. It's outrageous. Really, my founding statute, the Social Work Scotland Act, requires every local authority to promote social welfare, making available advice and assistance on such a scale as may be appropriate. Now, that's our founding statute. That's Absolutely. What we have to deliver. Clearly, there's an economic challenge to us in all of this, but I think that we have to find a way, and we will, in the Association of Directors, continue to try and find ways to make sure that we can promote the independence of...
Right. Because what's quite interesting, if you don't, what we're seeing a lot in the English courts is judicial review on some of the judgments where people are going into court and saying, you know what, this isn't a I don't want to do this, this is a I'm obliged under statute to do this. Do you think this is something we might see more in Scotland?
Well, Isabel, I think I'm making the point with Section 12. This is clearly an issue that could become a litigious issue, and I think that would be very regrettable. It's clearly the coalition government in Westminster has got enormous challenges to make. There is a need to reform, but we have to find a way through that doesn't throw people back into the 1970s. I was in the House of Lords for the debate on the second reading of the Welfare Reform Bill. Baroness Campbell, another woman like Pam, a great contributor in public life in the UK, was saying, my life's a house of straws. You take one straw away and it collapses. This is a real issue for people, and so I think, while understanding the need to reform, we're absolutely passionate about the need to retain the place of people in control of their own lives will have to find ways to do that.
Right. Just really briefly, if you don't mind, have you plans then, given it is so intensely political, to see Michael Moore or Maria Miller? Where do you take this from here?
Well, we've asked Michael Moore if he would set a meeting up with Maria Miller and disabled people's organisations in Scotland to talk about what these issues are, so that they can hear it from the horse's mouth, as it were, and have an understanding of the genuine fear that disabled people are experiencing. And so we've asked Maria Miller and Michael Moore to come to Scotland and to talk to disabled people, and so far that hasn't come to fruition.
Right.
And we're really keen that that does happen, and we would invite them again to come to Scotland and talk to disabled people about what these issues are.
Joe, we have to leave it there. We're out of time on it, but I promise we will come back to it and we'll follow it, especially any court progress. Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.